The purpose of this video is to walk you through the job application packet model and to talk to you a little bit about why this model works and what you can potentially take from this in order and incorporate into your own approach to the assignment. A note, however, when you look at this model, don't think that it's the only way you can do something. Students often will follow a model slavishly without really considering if it works for them or not. In a resume and in some of the other assignments that you'll see throughout the semester, there's a lot of different approaches you can take, especially to formatting. And you want to consider the formatting and the organization that works best for the purpose that you're trying to accomplish. So for instance, here you see Rory Gilmore. If you're a Gilmore Girls fan, you'll know where I got that reference. You see her resume, and you notice that she actually begins the resume with experience instead of with education. However, if you're a student, which you all are, and you don't have a lot of professional experience, beginning with your education is the more traditional way to go. And so you want to carefully consider that factor, for instance, in organizing your own resume. For this writer, she has a lot of professional experience, and for her it's more important to highlight that experience instead of her education. And so she places her experience first. As we proceed through here, you can see that she's using formatting pretty effectively. She's used a fairly clean design. It's simple, it's straightforward, it does the job. However, there are other options that you can use here for organization. And in fact, there are some things I would do differently myself as a writer that she doesn't do. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't work, and I think it does. It's consistent is the big thing here. You also see that she has these really clear descriptions of her jobs that and her duties that she's performed. Each of the descriptions begins with a really powerful verb: developed, managed, generated, aided, collaborated, created, and so on. And she's trying to vary those verbs up a lot. And I know in working with her that she struggled quite a bit to make sure that she had good varied verbs here. In addition, each of these descriptions is very specific. It's not met with people. It's collaborated with multiple departments on various successful projects, for instance, or developed a social media marketing strategy, including creative materials for each campaign. So, she's being very specific about what she accomplished. You don't want to go above more than 4 or 5 of these descriptions. She's maybe included a few more than you need. The general rule is 2 to 3, depending on the job itself. But because these positions are so relevant to what she's applying for, including a little more information helps her demonstrate the various aspects of these positions that and the experience she gained in those places. You can see here she's pretty consistent throughout with her formatting, which helps the reader understand that these are meant to be read all consistently. Again, you see here her education. She does include it. She's formatted it clearly. She's included the date of when she graduated and her degree that she's earned. In your education, you only include the degrees you have earned, not the degrees or classes you've taken other places. For you all, most of you who, I know I have a few post-bac students in this class, which means you've already earned a degree, and you would obviously include degrees that you've earned as a Bachelor of Arts or Sciences, or alternately, if you've earned an associate's degree, you would want to include that there as well. And you include your current education, so you all are pursuing degrees currently, and you would place that in the section first, and you would put expected and the date of graduation that you expect. Obviously, all of that is outlined elsewhere in your textbook and in the Career Center videos that I've provided. She also includes relevant technical proficiencies, and here these are really, really specific. They're not, I know how to use Microsoft Word, which is not that specific. Instead, they're proficiencies that are relevant to the position that she's applying for. So if you have those skills, you do want to include those, but if it's just that you know how to use PowerPoint, then you should leave that off. So she's done a pretty good job there of very clearly and concisely conveying her information. The next part is her cover letter, and here she has opted for a straightforward approach to formatting. She doesn't use a letterhead. If you do decide to use a letterhead, make sure it matches exactly what you include on your resume, as it's discussed in that Career Center video that I had you guys watch. So she has her address across the top, the date, the address of the place she's applying for, and then the 2-line with the colon. And she begins jumping into the content of the letter. This letter is really clear and specific, and she gives concrete details to back up the claims that she's making. So if you notice in the very first paragraph, she of course has that first sentence that says that she's applying to this particular position and how she learned about it. And then her second sentence is essentially why she would be a good fit for it, and it's very specific. So as a digital marketing professional with 6 years of hands-on experience in developing and executing online marketing initiatives, and that's very, very specific. And then she essentially says, hey, I'm going to be a good addition to your team. Now that sets up for the body of the letter where she's going to go into more detail about both of those things. So you can see here, her second paragraph, she mentions briefly that she has a degree, but she jumps really quickly into her experience. Again, for her, because she does have relevant professional experience, she wants to focus more on that rather than talking about her education. For you, if you don't have relevant professional experience, you want to incorporate any discussion of your education that's currently relevant, including specific projects that you've worked on, leadership that you've performed, any of that kind of information that you think would be appealing and relevant to the writer or the reader that you're writing for. So don't discount the fact that you have experience, even if it's not particularly relevant professionally, and especially if you're applying to an internship, they understand that you may not have professional experience, but that you have goals and that you're looking to accomplish those goals. The second paragraph, she focuses on a particular campaign that she worked on and the effect of that campaign, and that essentially she was able to create the social media accounts and that it led to success on the part of the company. So again, a very particular specific detail. You want to focus on concrete information. If you say that you have experience in something and then you don't give an example, it's not going to be nearly as powerful as it could be. And then she goes on through. So that's with the cover letter, and the things I want you to think about there are sticking really carefully with the conventions that I've provided, that the Career Center videos have provided, and that your textbook goes through. And being conscious, again, there's a number of ways you can approach that, but there is a pretty static approach in the sense that there's particular pieces of things you have to include. The last part of the job application packet is the memo. And the memo is your opportunity to explain to me, so you're writing your letter and your resume for the employer, or the position you're applying for, but the memo you're writing for me, and you're writing it to explain to me the choices you've made in terms of formatting, organizing, and what information you've decided to include in your resume, as well as your letter, and why you think that is relevant, important, and effective. So in a sense, you're beginning to do the job of analysis that we're going to extend into the next assignment. Here you can see that she's begun her memo with a brief overview of what I'm going to find in this memo. This is conventional for a longer memo, so you might consider including that as well. It can be 1 or 2 sentences. It should be very brief. She's offered the brief description of the job, and what the position entails. Very briefly, she's summarizing the job description in her own words. Don't copy and paste from the job description, but summarize it in your own words. Again, pretty brief. It's a memo. It's meant to give it a brief overview in order to move the reader quickly into the more important information. The audience analysis is a place a lot of students don't quite understand what to do here. And so often they'll jump into what they've done in their cover letter and their resume rather than focusing on who they're writing for. And here, Rory has done a good job of analyzing who the audience is. And so she says, the organization is forward-thinking and creative-minded and emphasizes individuality and personality. And then she explains how she knows that. And one of it is that she went and looked at their website, and she has this example where if you scroll over each individual's face, there's the person's wearing a snorkel mask or has a mascot head or something like that. So there's this sense that they're trying to convey themselves as fun. You'll want to do similar research. At least go look at their website. If you know somebody who works in the company, talk to them if you have insider information about who the audience is. And essentially, even if you don't know who precisely will be reading your materials, you can talk here about how you perceive the company culture and how that will influence the ways that you approach your letter and your resume. If you remember from the Career Center videos, the employers that they interviewed talked pretty heavily about this when it comes to tailoring job materials, and so you want to do your homework before you apply to a position. The last section is the rhetorical analysis, and here she goes through what she did in her cover letter and what she did in her resume that make it effective. And the thing I want to highlight here is that it involves claims and then evidence. So she has a claim in her second paragraph. Since showing examples of your work can prove to be a strong persuasive element, I decided to include an instance of my past client work. So essentially she says, hey, this is going to be really powerful, and then she goes into a little more detail about what she included and why that worked. And she's emphasizing that show, not tell approach to cover letters. She had to include this little bit about a potluck dish, which is not conventional for cover letters, but was actually part of their job advertisement, so she decided to justify that here to me. In addition, in her resume analysis, she goes into organization. That's her first point. Important information is shared first. So here she's justifying why she included her professional experience instead of her education first. They're going to be looking at that professional experience. And she talks about formatting. It's another thing you can address. She argues that she's using similar formatting throughout and consistency and how that is impactful on the reader. And then the inclusion of the relevant technical proficiencies. So you can organize these analyses in a couple of different ways, but essentially you want to highlight what the choice you made and why it's effective. Finally, you want to conclude briefly, essentially talking about what you learned from this experience, how effective you think your documents were. The big thing here is that you need to highlight gaps. So this particular writer didn't have a lot of gaps. It's a pretty good fit for her, that position. But you might find that you're applying for a position that you're not quite qualified for yet, or you feel like you would be a little more marketable if you had a little more experience in different areas. And so I want you to reflect on those gaps. What could you do between now and graduation to make yourself a more marketable candidate? Would it be getting involved with student groups? Would it be seeking out internships, taking different courses, study abroad, any of these kinds of opportunities you might have available to you? So this is just an overview of the packet. I just wanted to give you some tips to reinforce what I've stated in my paper description. Use this video, the models I've given, as well as the description to help guide your process of writing. And obviously, feel free to seek out feedback from me as you proceed.